bunch of deadbeats. Unbelievable. Nebraska. My name's Scott Redmond. I'm an alcoholic. Thanks to God, the 12 Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, the fellowship, and good sponsorship, I haven't had a drink since April 22nd, 1985. Now I feel like a Nebraskan. It is so great to be back in Nebraska. I've got so many friends here tonight and that I've met from all over the country. And my wife and I love the program in Nebraska. When we go to other states, and if we see a couple of you guys there, and we know when you're there, because if there's a couple of people with their hands out, and the other people in the room are looking at them like, who are these moonies, you know? Trying to create some kind of excitement or enthusiasm, you know. We know there's some people from Nebraska there, and it makes us feel much, much more comfortable. And I'm thrilled to death to be back here. I want to thank the committee and everybody involved with Pockets for having me out. It's a great honor to speak out here. And my wife, Nancy, will be out here in a couple of weeks at the state reunion, and she's really looking forward to that. We're kind of not leaving the house at the same time because we're concerned that if we both leave the house, we'll come back and our older son will be a mule for a drug cartel. So we're just trying to space it out a little right now. If you're new here, I'd like to welcome you to Alcoholics Anonymous. I have a great life, and I'm sure that just throws the hell out of you. If you've heard my story before, I'm sorry, I only have the one. I had some friends here who've heard my story somewhat, and I'd love to do it different. You know, when I came in, I was a small Polynesian woman, you know, and now I'm an overweight Jewish guy, and a mere 9 years later, but that would be fun, though, to go see somebody and their story's completely different, you know. I only have the one. If you're anything like me and you're new, you're looking around this room, this incredibly enthusiastic room, and you're saying to yourself, Alcoholics Anonymous. How did I wind up in Alcoholics Anonymous? How lame is this? This is beyond lame. This is beyond church, beyond synagogue. This is some plateau of lameness I never even imagined was available to me. Alcoholics Anonymous. Welcome. Welcome. We're glad you're here. And I know I was so very happy for the people who were having a good life in Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, when I was new, I'd sit there and I'd listen, and I'd think to myself, gee, you know, maybe you'll go home to that new house and it'll blow up, you know, and your family will blow up, and maybe you'll blow up. If you're new here, you're now privy to an unending reservoir of unsolicited information and advice. They're going to get right up in your face and they're going to talk that long AA crap to you, man. It's usually a guy with one tooth with a cavity in it, with a belt buckle large enough to serve a whole fish on. You know this guy. You know the guy. You know him, right? Do I want what you've got? I think not. I think not, man. I'm here in Alcoholics Anonymous. My life is over. Now I got to listen to this moron? I couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe it. If you're new here, you might have a lot of problems. I had a great experience some months ago. I was talking to this new guy, and he was a couple weeks sober. I just met him in a meeting, and he called me up and he talked for an hour, and I said about 4 times just to let him know I was alive, you know. And he told me, you know, that he had been stalking a couple of women. He had a restraining order out against him, but that was a couple of weeks ago. It's all different now. He's got some sobriety under his belt. And at the end of the hour, he said, I feel so all alone. I said, well, I hardly even know you, and I just listened to you for an hour without interrupting you. What do you mean you feel all alone? He said, I mean, I don't have a woman. I said, well, what exactly are you bringing to a relationship right now besides stalking skills? Right? What? What are you bringing to the party, pal? But you see, our problem mainly rests in our mind. People 2 weeks in remission from leukemia are not having dating problems. People who are 2 weeks in remission from yellow fever or cholera aren't having relationship problems. They're just trying to hold on. Our problem mainly rests in our mind. So if you're new here and you feel like you're living in a psychological theme park, you are. But if your problems are piling up at a seemingly unsolvable rate, and you're crushed under the weight of them, and you seem like you can't solve these problems or get a handle or just get ahead of them a little bit with your own resources, we're going to suggest to you that your resources are insufficient. That you're in the throes of the grips of a fatal illness that's got you behind the 8 ball and you'll never catch up. But the good news is we've got available here in Alcoholics Anonymous a substitute. We have a power here. It's the power that you hear in this room, this incredibly enthusiastic room that you can cling on to that will get you out of that loop. It will get you out of the loop of spree, remorse, and remorse. I grew up in New York City, in the Bronx in New York City. Yay. Yeah. She's probably here with the Witness Protection Program. Yeah, how do we get out here, you know? I was brought up in a completely insane family. My family was completely out of their minds. My wife never believed me about my family until she met them. My mom threw an engagement party for us, and my aunt came and wore her wig backwards, and it had a bun on it. And it wasn't a mistake, it was a look she was going after. She even wore it sort of jauntily askew, sort of beret style. Nancy walked around the room as if she had been hit by a wrecking ball. I mean, my family is really unbelievable. I had an uncle who was one of the top 10 welterweights of the world, and I wish I was lying about this because this is my genetic pool. His name was Izzy Redman, and he was a boxer who was going to fight down south, and he was concerned about anti-Semitism, and he asked his manager to change his name to Izzy Goldberg so no one would know he was Jewish. Oh, man. And when his manager said, well, what? He explained that he thought that they'd think he was German. It was 1939. The Germans were pulling in a lot of fans around that particular time. Just so you don't think, a lot has changed. A couple of months ago, my mom called me and said, honey, I've got bad news for you. Your Uncle Izzy's dead. This is her brother-in-law. I said, oh, no, Mom. When did he die? A year ago. I said, what? She said, a year ago. I said, well, did you not know? Have you known? She said, well, sweetheart, your Aunt Phyllis is in the mental institution again, and she calls me and harasses me, so I haven't been picking up the phone. But it's okay. Phyllis died a couple of weeks ago, so I've been picking up the phone again, and I found out Izzy's dead. If you're new here, all I have is good news. My family did not have one single solitary thing to do with making me an alcoholic. They're nuttier than fruitcakes. Believe me, I'm only giving you the tip of the iceberg. Nuts, and not one single thing to do with making me an alcoholic. So if you're new here, you don't get to go to psychotherapy and work out your family problems and then drink like a normal person. You'll still have to go to parties and say, no heroin for me, I'll have a Perrier for the rest of your life. I'm not telling you not to go to therapy. That's an outside issue. I have no idea what you need to do about that. I'm not telling you I didn't need to clean up some stuff and repair some stuff and take a look at some stuff. But treating my alcoholism was a completely different notion. And I personally thought, because I had been in psychotherapy for 18 years by the time I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. If you're new here and you're not an alcoholic, I would like to welcome you to Alcoholics Anonymous. I was not an alcoholic when I got here. I was Jewish, number one, and I was taught pretty young that Jews don't drink because it might dull the pain. And you don't you don't want to miss out on any agony opportunities. You want to be clear, crystal clear, and ready. And in addition to being Jewish, I was in psychotherapy for 18 years. And in addition to that, I was not an alcoholic. I was an interesting, complicated artist. So I was not an alcoholic. I was a artistic Jewish patient, I guess is what I was. So if you're new here, if you're not an alcoholic, if you're a drug addict, I'd like to welcome you to AA. If you're a dope fiend, which is somehow worse than all of us, I'd like to welcome you to AA. If you're like the Bigfoot of dope addicts, a dope Goliath, I'd like to welcome you to AA and suggest you can be anything you want. You might want to catch alcoholism, though. I don't care what you've got. You can have all that stuff, but we've got a book for alcoholism. We don't have a book for artistic Jewish patient. We don't have a book for dope fiend. We don't have a book for any of that stuff. We have a book for alcoholics. And I want to tell you, it took me a long time to catch alcoholism in Alcoholics Anonymous. A long time. I caught it from you. You gave me alcoholism. I did not have it when I got here. I have a lousy case of it today, and I caught it at the meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. So I grew up in this crazy family in the Bronx, and my dad thought that he was a real failure, and I completely agreed with him. I just thought he was a sap, My dad never made more than $10,000 a year. My brother and I never missed a meal and never went to school with ripped clothing. My last year out there, I made $80,000, and my children did go to school with ripped clothing, and they did miss meals. How does that happen? How did my father become a loser? Put those two pictures down and right next to each other and take a look at them, just like I did. How does my dad come out a loser? My dad had come out a loser because a certain kind of thinking had become established in me that had placed me beyond human help. Our book is pretty remarkable. And in our book, in the first couple of chapters, in chapter 2 and 3, there's a list of things people say about us. The doctor says if he drank again, he'd die. There he is, all lit up again. You think he'd get sober for her. Why can't he lay off the hard stuff? And then there's a list of things we say to ourselves, like, I'll stop after the sixth one. How did this happen again? And in both of those lists, there's a world of misunderstanding about alcoholism. There's a world of misunderstanding about the people who are observing our behavior, and there's a world of misunderstanding about us, about our own behavior. Because it goes on to say in that chapter that if you ask an alcoholic why he or she has had a drink, considering the attendant suffering and misery that follow every time they had the first drink, if you ask them and they stick with you and they don't slough you off, odds are they have no more idea than you do. So I grew up in this family, and I set some really lofty goals for myself. And by the time I got sober, I had reached or surpassed these goals. By the time I got sober, I had a book on the bestseller list. I had acted in a Broadway play. I had directed a film. I had directed a television show. I had had my own theater in New York. I had done all of these things a ton. I never got to do any of them more than once. Because when I'd leave, they'd move the business so I couldn't find it again. And the reason was people were horrible to me. Boy, man, they turn like that. Unbelievable. Horrible to me. When I took the picture of my alcoholism, if you knew, we have an alcoholic test. It's called an inventory. It's a pass-pass situation. All you have to do is do one and you pass. Other diseases have blood tests, x-rays. We have an inventory. And it's the alcoholic test. And if you take it and then you read it all to somebody, you get to see a picture of your alcoholism. And when I did mine and I got to see a picture of my alcoholism, I saw that early on people were doing things behind my back. A little later on they started talking behind my back. And in the last few years they started thinking behind my back. And that's horrible. That's a horrible thing. You can catch them. You got to accuse them of it all the time. And you'll get them eventually. And that was happening. That happened to me for a long, long time. The other thing I did through this period of time, besides psychotherapy, was I drank till I didn't want to be a drunk. I overcame my drinking problem with marijuana. Do you remember WOW? Do you remember WOW and then what? What? Wow. What? It's like watching people smoke pot's like watching a dog try to run on linoleum, you know? There's a lot of activity, but it never catches, you know? There's just no forward movement, you know? I triumphed over marijuana with pills. I was victorious over pills with cocaine. Cocaine's a good drug. It's particularly good for sex if you enjoy sex from the Neolithic period. I kicked that lousy cocaine habit with heroin. Heroin's also a great drug. It starts out as a dark, fascinating, kind of artistic, adventurous drug, and then you cross a line and become a vomiting pig. You don't want to do that too long, and then I would drink till I didn't want to be a drunk. And I've been asked to share my story tonight, so what the heck, I'm going to go ahead and do it. We are at an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, and it wasn't until I was in Alcoholics Anonymous for a period of time and read some of the stories, some of our personal adventures before and after, before I realized that my swapping my addictions was my method of avoiding alcoholism. Neatly evading it. We thought we had neatly evaded it. By the time I was 21 years old, my father had a massive heart attack, and I was stoned on heroin the night that he died. I had holes in my arm. I couldn't be there for him or my mother or my brother, and I felt like an animal, like a pig. Cut off from the society of other people, cut off from my family, and I failed my father probably during the moment where a son is really supposed to be there. Really supposed to be there. And I swore I would never put a needle in my arm again, and I didn't. Shortly after this, I met a remarkable woman. This woman, gorgeous, fascinating, exotic woman. She was from Detroit. You know, that was so exotic to me. I had never been out of the Bronx. Detroit seemed so, you know, incredible. She didn't seem to have this horrible weight, you know, around her. And you know, some people, and you hear it in the program, and I know it's true for them, that they're attracted to damaged people. And I've always been attracted to healthy people, and then I screw them up. And my wife got sick from prolonged exposure to me. I mean, that's really what happened to her. And Nancy and I became so sick together that a guy lent us his car, and we sold his car. We sold this guy's car. I will never in my life forget this guy's voice on the phone when I call him up. He said, "You sold my car? How could you sell my car? I lent you my car. You sold my car." When I called this guy up 15 years later to make amends, his voice was exactly the same. He said, "You're paying me back?" It was like he was frozen at the other end of the phone, you know, all that time. And he was certainly more surprised with the second call. I was certainly more surprised with the second call, I know that. If you wrote everything I did down in 8 years of marriage in a book, and you gave it to this woman and she read it, and you said, "Would you live with this?" She'd say, "No, who would live with this?" But spread it out over 8 years, throw in chronic success, throw in a best-selling book, throw in a bouquet of roses now and again, throw in the fact that quite often I was telling the truth over here. Right? They know the end of this story. Got a little murky over here. It was quite an out-and-out lie by the time I got to the drink. It was quite often the truth over here. You know, they made this film about Bill W a couple of years ago. I didn't much like the film, but there was one thing I loved. Every time Bill did something that he didn't understand, he looked into the camera and went like that. I get that. I get that fully. Nancy and I became so sick together. I had this idea to cook something, and I died in the middle of the idea. I just went down. I went toxic. I had overdosed. But I had this idea. She came home, and the stove was on. I had a frying pan on my hand, and I was laying on the floor. And I was blue. I mean, I was going. And she called the doctor and described the situation in an empty vial. And the doctor said, call an ambulance. And she hung the phone up and said, and got another opinion. She called another doctor. She called another doctor to get a second opinion on a corpse. Man. We became very, very sick together. We had 2 children who became grievously ill from alcoholism. Fear ought to be classed with stealing. It seems to cause more trouble. The fabric of our lives is shot through with it, and how horribly true for the young people who are exposed to alcoholism. Because you see, it doesn't matter what I say over here. If you're in between me and the drink, you're going to turn into a papier-mâché figure, or you're going to disappear. I'm either going to walk around you, or I'm going to walk through you. And if I got to walk around you, I got to walk bigger and bigger circles because it hurts too much to look at you at all. And if you're a little baby, and children have such little ego strength to begin with, how much disappearing can you bear? How many times can your needs, wants, and desires vanish, no matter what I say over here? It doesn't matter, because I'm answering a call beyond my control. How long until the child believes what they're being taught? Not what is being said to them, what is being taught to them, which is, you don't exist. You don't matter, you don't exist, you're not here, no matter what I say. And that's what happened to our boys, and they became grievously sick from alcoholism. By the time I got sober, our older son was making involuntary clicking noises with his throat that he couldn't stop making in school. He was reading and writing years below his grade level. He tested in excess of 168 IQ, and he could hardly write. He was cut off from the society of other children, crushed up like a Dixie cup from being terrified. This is the family that came to Alcoholics Anonymous on April 22nd, 1985. Because at that time, I crossed a line that I swore that I would never cross again. I put a needle in my arm and did something I swore I would never do. I called my therapist of record, and I told him what I had done, and he said, "There's absolutely nothing that can be done for you." I said, "What?" He said, "There's nothing I can do for you. The only thing I can suggest is you attend a meeting of Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, or we have you institutionalized." Now, on most other days, I would have gladly chosen the institution. Make no mistake. The last few years I was out there, I got excited when they told me I needed dental surgery. All right? That doesn't get even a titter at the Lions Club, by the way. But you know that's an uninterrupted source of narcotics for a period of time. There's heads going up and down here. That doesn't happen anywhere but in AA meeting. All right? No normal people go, dental surgery. Wow. Normal people don't do that. If you're new here and I said dental surgery and you got a little shot of adrenaline, welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. Man, if you're new here and you're dreaming about drinking, welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. Normal people don't dream about drinking. My mother has never dreamt about walking into a palace made of cocaine. Ever. Ever. And it doesn't mean you're going to drink. It means you might be bodily and mentally different from your fellows. If you're dreaming about drinking, hold on to that dream. Help that let you take this first step maybe a little deeper. You know. So, I don't know why, but I went to an AA meeting. I went to an AA meeting. I came home and poured myself a glass of wine. I turn around and Nancy's giving me the rat face. You know, this. I said, "What?" She said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Honey, these people are civilized people. They're not fanatics. You don't stop drinking completely. You have a glass of wine like a civilized, sophisticated person." Then I went to another meeting, and I had already sent some money down to Texas for some drugs. They were already paid for. It was incumbent upon me to take the drugs. It was a new drug called ecstasy. Unbelievable. I saw tears come to people's eyes. I took this drug. I didn't even feel Jewish anymore. I mean, this drug hit me, man. I mean, it washed over me. I couldn't believe it. I said, I don't need that AA thing, man. I'm not going to need that AA thing. Not with what... It wears off. It wears off. It always wears off. And I woke up at 5 a.m. the next day. I put on my best clothes. I got a bad check to write you. And I went to report to Alcoholics Anonymous. I walked into that room, 7 a.m. meeting. You know, people are just hanging on by a thread. You know those 7 a.m. meetings. Most of them wearing their underwear on the outside of their clothing, for God's sake. I'm there in my best clothes to report to Alcoholics Anonymous. I couldn't believe it, man. I just kept looking around the room. But you see, the kind of bully I am, I'm a nice guy. I'm a sterling human being. And then if you don't do what I want you to do, you should die in a flaming car crash. But my first shot is to bully people by being a nice guy. So I'd grin and, you know, and listen to them and pray that their face would burst into flame. You know, just go up in a column of smoke, man. And I have no idea why I stuck around. I couldn't tell you why I stuck around. If you're new here, I hope you're out of plans. If you're new here and you have a plan, it's probably a beaut. Don't use your plan. Grab one of us after the meeting and tell us your plan. We want to know your plan. That's actually the book I've always wanted to see, is the collection of newcomer plans. It would have a lot of diagrams in it. Man. But I don't know why I stuck around. I stuck around here 6 months and enjoyed the gift of step none. Absolutely, completely out of my mind. I didn't know that I was suffering from untreated alcoholism. I didn't even have alcoholism yet. You know. Drinking works. That's a treatment for alcoholism that works. It works. It kills you, but it works. If you're not drinking and you're not using the program of action outlined in our book, ooh, man, what a bear. Untreated alcoholism I find particularly unattractive in those who are not drinking. You can pick them up out of the meetings pretty quick. You know, they usually have a vein pumping like a garden hose on their forehead. They're a happy lot. You can count all the ligaments in their neck, you know. They're always real anxious to talk to a new guy, you know. And I was suffering from untreated alcoholism. I mean, the kids were starting not to get so scared of me, and Nancy was kind of, you know, starting to go to Al-Anon family group meetings, and, you know, I was 6 months sober. I was completely out of my mind, and I asked the guy to sponsor me. This guy, I knew he had been a bad guy. And I just knew it from looking at him. You know, you looked into his eyes and saw those little bunny rabbits and antelope popping around, you know. I knew this guy had been an animal, and he wasn't anymore. And he talked about God, and he didn't sound like a sap to me. And I asked him to sponsor me, and he took me to his apartment. And he spent hours with me. A man who I hardly knew spent hours with me. Hours and hours with me. And he addressed every problem I have ever had or ever will have that afternoon in his apartment. He addressed my resentments against myself, my resentments against you, my unsolvable sexual problems, and my overwhelming fears. Because this is the architecture of alcoholism. This is the soul sickness, the cancer of the soul, that leaves alcoholics eaten up from the inside like a tapeworm's gotten to them, and leaves them insane and empty and alone. Now, I hear from some people, and I know it's absolutely true for them, that they mostly resented themselves. And I know it's true for them, and I know it's also not true for me. I hated you way more than I hated me. I mean, I hated me, but I really hated you. I am not a suicide guy. I'm a homicide guy, you know? And I'm not putting the suicide people down. I'm not. Don't take this as a knock. I think they're really the flip side of the same coin, you know, in a way. But I have always vastly preferred your death to mine. It's just, where I come from. So I really had some resentments I needed to put down against you. And my sponsor sat me down and he said, I'm going to read chapter 5 to you. And we're going to work the first 3 steps together, and then I'm going to give you instructions of this inventory. And by the time I was 9 months sober, I finished this 5th step. I came and I read it to him. And our book says, now we really begin to have a spiritual experience. And I really did begin at that point. Because it's important to take step 1. But just for me, I took step 1 on a pretty primitive level compared to step 1 after an inventory. I mean, you want to take step 1, do an inventory. I'm resentful at them. I'm resentful at me for resenting them. I'm resentful at them for watching me resent them. And I've had sex with all of them. Right? Right? How did I get out of bed in the morning? How did I do anything? How did I function? My life is unmanageable? Yes. My life is... I was willing to give you a little bit when I first came in and did the first step. I was willing to tell you some things were unmanageable. But once I did that inventory, man, the web is so thick. This sickness is so thick. It's absolutely remarkable. So I did the 5th step with my sponsor, and I did 6 and 7 for the first time, and then it came time to do my 8th step list. I try to share this every time I share because it's just one of the greatest things that ever happened to me in Alcoholics Anonymous. It's the best reading of the 8th step I've ever heard. It happened in my old home group by a guy who I had never seen before, and I've never seen him since. His name was Nino. He had a heavy New York accent. He had never seen chapter 5 before. He was there with a hospital group, and he had a hospital plastic bracelet on his hand. He got up to the 8th step, and he read, made a list of all those we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. Jesus Christ! And he looked out into the room as if to say, have you seen this? Do you know what's in here, man? It was so beautiful. It's exactly what happened to me when I saw the steps. It's all that I saw. No, not those people, not that money. I wouldn't have taken that much money, man. No way. Oh, man. Not the car. Ugh. It's exactly what happened to me when I saw the steps. If you're new here, don't worry about it. It's 8 steps from where you are. You don't have to worry about it. And it's not 8 that's going to get you. It's 9. And that's 9 steps from where you are. That's even better news, right? So I did my 8-step list, and I said, geez, what am I going to put my dad down there for? He's dead. There's nothing I can do about that. My sponsor said, do you owe him an amends? I said, absolutely. He said, you put him down there. I said, but what am I going to do? And Don said, I don't know, Scott. I don't know what you're going to do. But I know that if you find the right kind of service, that God God is performing this miracle in the middle of your life. You don't drink and you don't use drugs. You don't drink, man. You don't drink. There's a miracle in the middle of your life that will make all other miracles possible if you work on that miracle. And it's the not drinking part. If you're new here, don't drink. It'll screw your sobriety up. And sometimes we get real diffuse in Alcoholics Anonymous. You go to some meetings and you hear a lot about boundaries and issues, and I'm not putting it down, but you got to not drink in order to have a boundary or an issue. Stick around here, you'll have boundaries and issues. If it wasn't for the not drinking part, we'd be a bigger organization, Our ranks would swell if it weren't for the not drinking part, because a lot of people want what we've got, but it's that not drinking thing, it messes them up. So I put my dad on the list, I put my children on the list, I put Nancy, my wife, on the list. And this is just for me, I said to my sponsor, well, shouldn't I put me on the list? He said, oh, the promises aren't enough for you. They're not enough for you. Jeez, well, we should have had a longer list of promises, maybe. And I know some people need to be on their 9-step list. 8-step list. I'm not putting them down. I'm just saying for me. My sponsor he knew my story, he heard my inventory, and he knew the last place I needed to be was on my 8-step list. Because I had been, and I didn't need to do a character asset list either. I had worked on a character asset list for 33 years. I didn't believe a goddamn word of it anyway. You know? And, you know, if you've been, and that's one of the reasons I love being in Nebraska, you know, is I get to hear and I get to say as a result of good sponsorship. You know, and I love this man. I love this man who is my sponsor and has become my friend and has given me this incredible gift that I've been able to pass on to other people. He's a piece of work, too. I mean, this man, a couple of weeks before he came to AA, planned on committing suicide. And right before he planned on committing suicide, he stopped smoking. I mean, I heard this, and then I asked him to sponsor me, right? He was going to kill himself. He had one steak knife in the house. He was going to kill himself with a steak knife, and he was trying to figure out a way to cut below the tie line so he'd look good in the coffin. Right. So who's nuts? I run up to the guy and say, will you sponsor me, be my spiritual guide, right? Unbelievable. So I did that 8-step list, and I started doing my job in Alcoholics Anonymous. I couldn't really sit down with my children and say, gee, boys, so sorry you've had no life. It would have been I'm sorry were the two emptiest words in my vocabulary. They were meaningless for me by the time I got to Alcoholics Anonymous. With my kids, I had to show up to a lot of Little League games. I had to coach some flag football. I had to spend some heroin money on clothes. I had to spend some cocaine money on new bicycles. I'm not talking about a lot of money. I'm talking about the money, you know. I had to help with some homework assignments. When my kid asked me how to ask a girl how to dance, I had to try to show him. I had to do the things that you showed me how to do in Alcoholics Anonymous because I didn't know how to do them. And the boys started getting better. They started recovering from alcoholism. My wife reached out to the Al-Anon family groups, and I was just so proud of her and a really remarkable woman. And she started. We don't work on our relationship anymore. My idea of working on a relationship is to talk to you until you change your mind. Talk to you until your eyes roll back in your head and you keel over, and on the way down you go, okay. Man. We had to try to work on ourselves and try to bring something besides somebody with stalking skills, you know, back to the deal. And the kids really started going through some remarkable things. They found an entire class of grown-up who was terrified of them. Those were the new guys who came to my house. When Jesse was about 8, he walked up to this guy, brought the guy in, and Jesse walked up to him and said, "What step you on, pal?" The guy went, four. I'm here to do 4. I said, he's 8 years old, man, for God's sake. Last year, this guy had him over to do a 5th step on Wednesday night. He came over to finish it Thursday night. Jesse's sitting in the living room, was doing his homework. He doesn't even look up. Won't even give the guy enough of a break to look up from his work. He goes, "What's the matter, dude? Blew it last night? Got to do it again?" It's a tough room. It's a tough room. I fancied myself a show business big shot when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, my first year of sobriety, I was had some good writing jobs, and I was up to direct a situation comedy, and I was about a year sober. I was becoming sort of, you know, a spiritual Goliath. And I didn't get the job, and I almost drank. And my sponsor said, "You got that show business God, pal. You got that show business God." I heard a lot about God when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, and some of it I liked, and some of it scared me. I heard God getting people into relationships, getting them out of relationships. God getting people parking spaces, taking parking. I said, no, not the parking God, not the parking God. Oh man, what do you do if you don't get a space? What happens, right? And I said, man, you have got to get a God not involved in parking on any level. You got to get a God big enough so that you can get the TV job or not get the TV job, so that a lot of stuff can happen in His universe and you don't get to drink. And it scared the hell out of me. And I had to sit down and write that 10-step, the resentments against the people who hadn't given me the job, the resentment against myself for almost drinking. And Don said to me, he said, you go do step 6 and 7, and you ask God what you're going to have to do to stay sober. And I did. And I said, as part of my 6 and 7 step, I said, Father, I am willing to do anything. I will do anything. Just don't let me drink. And within 3 months, I was working as a cook on a catering truck. And I looked up to God and I said, I didn't mean this. I didn't mean this. We've had a grotesque misunderstanding. And you see, in Los Angeles, when they make a TV show or a movie, they have a catering truck that goes on location to feed the people, and it's a good paying job. And the first movie that I catered, the executive producer and star of the movie was a guy who I had worked with in the business. And he stuck his head on that truck that morning and he said, "Can I have a burrito, Scott?" And I said, "What's happening, man?" He said, "Is this your truck?" I said, "No, but it's my spatula." I called my sponsor. I said, "We're getting the gift now, pal. We're really getting the gift of sobriety now, bud. This is great." He said, "Sounds like you've got a resentment." Well, they go to sponsor school, right? To come up with stuff like that. Said, "Sounds like you've got to sit down and write yourself a 10-step. That's how we do it in my AA family. One of the reasons, again, that I love being out here so much is I'm a member of a very enthusiastic and committed AA family. And I love being part of it. And in my AA family, not because it's better or worse, it's just because the way we do it, we all have different things that we do that help us walk closer to God and make us feel part of a group. We write our 10 steps down. And I sat down and I wrote, "I am resentful at Scott for working on a kitchen truck. It affects my self-esteem, pocketbook, ambition, personal relations, and sex. A 5-bagger for sure." Man! Now, what do I ask God to take away? This is a resentment. No big deal. Resentment's just the source of all spiritual illness, the great destroyer of all alcoholics. It'll cut you off from the sunlight of the Spirit, take your ass out and kill you dead, but don't be alarmed, right? No big deal. Work a step a year. This is life and death. What am I going to do, man? What am I going to ask God to remove? The guy, the burrito, the truck? What am I going to ask Him to take away? I'm dying! Blue skies. God's got a magic wand. He comes and touches me on the head. What poison in me if it was removed? What are the defects of character in me that if God would remove, the resentment would be gone? False pride. Grandiose. How dare a man of my caliber work on a kitchen truck, make a living, and bring money home? Unheard of. I'm impatient. Things aren't moving along. I'm playing God. Things aren't going according to the Scott Redmond program, a fabulous program. I have low self-esteem. I'm judgmental and a retaliator. I never have to open my mouth to judge and retaliate, right? That happens when my head hits the pillow and it becomes a rotisserie. I was resentful at the guy for what? Being hungry? I mean, for the guy was a sweet guy. He didn't rub it in, but I was resentful at him, and I was resentful at God for putting